There was this really brief incident about 5 years ago, and it's a very strange one. I was camping with my boyfriend Christian and two of his friends. We were out there for 3 days and would have left the next day if not for the next set of events I'm about to tell you. We woke up around 7 in the morning and it was 9ish by the time we finished breakfast. Christian and I were going to go for a hike and his friends had planned to fish at the lake for the day. We were about to go our separate ways when a girl came running out of the woods screaming for help. She was beaten up pretty badly and the first thing she asked us was if we had guns with us. We told her no and she pleaded to us that we all had to run. When Christian tried to calm her down, she told us that she was leaving and implored us to leave the mountain as well. She said, "Forget about your stuff and just run." She tried to run away after that, but Christian caught up to her in seconds. He grabbed her by the arm, told her that we were leaving as well, and that she stood a better chance at getting off this mountain in our SUV. Christian's friends were against the idea of leaving without our stuff, and my boyfriend responded angrily, "Look at her, you morons," pointing to the girl. He continued talking while showing his friends the deep cut on the girl's back. "Does this look like something that she's done to herself? I'm taking Miranda and her with or without you. I suggest you come with us, you freaking idiots." Christian held my hand, told the girl to follow us, then the three of us ran at full speed toward our vehicle. The friends followed us only seconds later and we safely escaped the mountain. We took the girl to the nearest police station. There, we told the cops what we knew, which wasn't much. They made copies of our IDs, took down our contact information, and that was it. As for the girl, we saw her being taken in an ambulance before we left the police station. 2 days thereafter, the police picked up our things from the camp and told us to come get them. I was hoping they would have an update on the case, but unfortunately they couldn't tell us much. I kept insisting at one of the deputies that they owe us an explanation. I told them that we camped there all the time and that we'd have to know if the mountain wasn't safe anymore. The young deputy gestured for me and Christian to come outside and we followed him. He told us this, "I can't tell you exactly what happened to the girl because she's gone completely mental. She tells us that it wasn't a person that's done it to her. But then she also says it was neither a wild animal. She keeps mentioning about a hideous creature and goes into a state of shock whenever she's forced to recall the event. We've been barred from talking to her by the doctors. We were told not to interview her until she gets better, mainly mentally. We've been searching the forest since day one and were unable to find any significant lead to the case. My suggestion is for you and your friends to stay out of these woods for the time being. Based on the wounds on the girl, we think that it was a wild animal that's attacked her. She's probably thinking creatures and monsters because she's still in shock. Just take your things and don't come back for a while." And that was it. We never heard anything more from the police, and we certainly haven't gone back camping in the same area. I honestly don't know what could have happened to that girl on that day. If there's one thing that I can tell you, is that I've never seen anyone with so much fear in their eyes. That girl was absolutely terrified of something. So I think by now everyone knows about the mysterious boom sounds unless they've been living under a rock. Well, I happened to hear it for the first time on my last camping trip. This was about a month ago and my friends and I were in the middle of the woods in search of the campsite we had originally planned to go. Basically, we got lost while trying to get to our destination. That resulted in everyone getting frustrated and one of my friends had called it quits. The same friend took out his compass and told us we should head east to come across the main road. That sounded better than doing circles around the forest, so we headed east in hopes to find civilization. We must have walked for about 20 minutes when everyone stopped in their tracks simultaneously. The thing is, the forest started singing. And singing is the appropriate description of the sound because I tell you, it sounded like the lower pitch version of the whale cries. I can tell you right now that it wasn't an animal because the amplitude of the sound was truly immense. I could feel the sounds bouncing off my skin and giving off that tingling sensation on top of my head. It was by far one of the most magnificent and at the same time the most terrifying sounds I had ever heard with my ears and felt on my body. We hauled ass right away and eventually came across the main road some half an hour later. The sound, by the way, continued for about 20 minutes until it stopped abruptly. I know there are many variations of the mysterious boom sounds, and what we heard, I believe it's one of them. In any event, I've been camping my butt on my couch ever since. I enjoy playing on my PS4 in the safety of my couch far more than being sung by the forest. My dad told me to go out a little more and I tried. I like the city, and nature, you scary. Last week, I went camping for the first time in my life with 3 of my friends who consider themselves to be expert campers. Brian, Lawrence, Michael, and I, we've been friends since the time we couldn't even speak. I know it doesn't make sense. I just mean to say that our parents are all friends. The 3 of them are outgoing and boisterous. However, I'm the complete opposite of that. I can't for the life of me understand how we continued to be friends for so long until the age of 26. But we are, and we've been inseparable ever since we came to know each other. In any event, we set up camp. Well, they set up camp, and we were sort of lounging around the campfire, complaining about our jobs, our bosses, and girlfriends. Then, in the middle of a conversation about Michael's boss, I heard something move near the tree line behind my back. I got up, turned around, and told the guys, "Hey, I think I heard something move over there." Lawrence threw a pebble on my feet and said, "Oh, our baby Jonathan scared the woods. You poor little thing. Do you need a hug, princess?" "Shut up, numbnuts," I shot back. And that's when Michael told everyone to shush and said, "Jonathan's right. There's someone out there." That's when Lawrence got up and shouted, "Whoever's out there, we're not gonna bite ya. Don't be shy. Please come out and say hi." Right after Lawrence said those words, I saw him backpedal, trip on the tent line, then his ass kissed the ground. A man had come out of the woods and that scared the crap out of Lawrence. I don't mean to embarrass my friend. Lawrence can get a bit cocky and loud sometimes, but more often than not, he backs up his brashness with his huge balls. This time, however, it was different in that the man from the woods showed up with a rifle in his hands. It was intimidating at the very least. The man walked toward us with a creepy grin on his face and said, "You can bite me if you want, but I can't guarantee that I won't shoot you. So how about it, sissy boys? Want to take a bite?" We were all quiet. A huge rifle held by a mean old man has that effect on people. By the way, this dude, he looked put together. He was wearing some fancy hunter outfit. He was also shaved and his hair was well groomed. He looked nothing like someone who'd be creeping on strangers in the woods. As far as appearance goes, he looked normal. I think that's what made him even scarier, if that makes any sense. After a short period of silence, Lawrence finally spoke. "Look man, we don't want any trouble. We thought we heard something, my friend got spooked, and we were only making a joke out of the situation. We meant no offense, so why don't you go do your thing in the woods and we'll mind our own business." The man stared at us intently. He looked each and every one of us in the eyes for what felt like an eternity, then said, "Yeah, you boys stay here. Don't be walking around the woods when I'm hunting. It'd break my heart if I shot one of you mistaken for a deer." He then walked back into the woods and we thought that was the end of it until shots were fired in our direction. We all hit the ground and could only pray that we wouldn't get hit. I counted 7 shots fired, and it was incredible how the sounds echoed in the woods. It almost seemed like we were getting shot from all directions. The shooting stopped, and right away we asked each other if anyone was shot. Thankfully, everyone was okay. I can't say the same for the tent, however. It was shot up pretty badly. In fact, it must have been the tent that the crazy hunter was aiming at. I guess if he wanted us dead, we'd be dead. As you might imagine, we packed up and left right away. We called the police, gave our statement, but nothing came of it. The shooter shut up our tent and got away with that. There's little chance that I'll ever go camping again, but if I do, I don't think I'm going without packing heat. Exactly 27 years ago from today, I was out camping with my dad and brother on a remote mountain. I remember the exact date because it was my 11th birthday and I had asked Dad to take me on a camping trip for my birthday gift. My mom passed away from cancer when I was only 9 years old. I remember we used to go camping all the time when she was healthy. She really loved nature and seemed like a completely different person whenever we were out camping. Mom played the role of the enforcer in our household, and Dad was the negotiator that worked things out between us and Mom. The point is, she was strict in the way she brought us up. However, that wasn't so much the case when we were out camping. Out in nature, Mom became one of us. She became a child as well. That's why I love camping. It brings back wonderful memories of Mom, and not to mention today, I'm making my own set of pleasant memories with children of my own. But yeah, 27 years ago on my 11th birthday, I was out camping with Dad and Miles because I wanted to remember Mom. Our campsite was situated at about 2/3 of the way to the summit. Therefore, we had a high vantage point and a really beautiful view of all nature below. At around 9 p.m., we were getting ready to hit the sack. The campfire was still going strong, and me and my brother were begging our dad to tell us another scary story before going to bed. Dad was laughing one moment, but then he suddenly got up and quickly put out the fire, tossing rocks and dirt on top of it. I kept asking him what was going on, but Dad told us to wait and grab the binocular. I remember thinking why he would try to look through the binocular at this time of the night and in this place where there's not a single artificial light. A minute later, he gave me the answer as he said, "Okay guys, it's probably nothing, but I see a group of maybe 30 to 40 people with torches in their hands. They're probably just local people looking for something or someone. I'm not really sure, but what I am sure is that they're not search and rescue, nothing official like that. I'm just being cautious here, so I don't want you guys to be scared. We still have plenty of time before they get close to our location, and I'm sure they haven't seen our fire. This is what we're going to do. We're going to pack things up, stay off the main trail, let those people pass, then we'll hike down and go back to our car." I couldn't understand it back then, but I think Dad was probably worried that those people with torches were possibly cultists. At any rate, Miles and we helped with what we could, but Dad packed everything up so fast that we hardly did anything. After that, Dad took us as far as he could off the main trail. I say as far as he could because we didn't move that far off. I believe he was worried that we might get lost if we lost sight of the trail. So we waited there until the torch people would pass. I'm not fully certain, but I think about 20 minutes must have passed when the people with torches were passing through the area of our campsite. They were carrying something in what seemed like a makeshift stretcher, and they kept repeating some weird phrase over and over again. They sounded like Latin words to me at the time. Dad gestured for us to stay low and quiet. We didn't panic, we didn't move, and calmly waited until they passed us. A couple of minutes had passed after that, and Dad whispered to us, "Guys, we're gonna get back to the main trail and go back to the car." He then handed us a rope that was tied to his waist and said, "You hold on to this and don't let go. You call out for me quietly if you lose grip of it. Remember, it's easy to get lost out here in the dark. We have to stick together. You got that?" Miles and I both nodded, then we began the trek back to our car. It took a while, but Dad got us back to the car safely. We drove off the base of the mountain, and I remember passing by a police station, but we didn't stop. Dad didn't even call the police. I asked him why many years later. I think I was in my freshman year in college when I asked him why he wouldn't call the cops. He told me this: "It's probably because I watched one too many horror films. At the time, I didn't think that we could be so unlucky that we would bump into the cultists on their first ritual outing. I didn't think they were there for the first time. And if so, how could the police not know? I mean, you're talking about 30 to 40 grown men marching through the mountain with torches in their hands. How do you miss that? So I figured they must be in on it as well. And I'm not saying that I'm certain of that. For all you know, they could have been, I don't know, just some weirdos playing out their fantasies. But it didn't matter what they were or that the police were in on it. I had you and your brother with me, and my job was to get you guys safely back home. That's all I thought of on the mountain and while I was driving you guys back home. So yeah, that's why I did nothing. One, I didn't want to risk anything, and two, what would the cops do if they caught the torch people? Give them a summons for carrying open flames on a mountain? Maybe I should have called the police. You might be right about that. But sweetie, I think I'm a decade too late for that. So yeah, that was his reasoning, and I gotta say, I understand him. I can't imagine how terrifying it would be if I were in the same situation with my kids. I think Dad did just fine. As for the torch people, who knows what they were, but surely they were weirdos. It's all in the past now, but I thought I'd share this story with you on my birthday, on the day that it happened. This is the scariest experience I had in my life, and thank God for that. Once is more than enough. I went camping with my girlfriend about 2 years ago. It was my first time camping and the same for my girlfriend Sarah. We were hiking on a popular trail which along the way branches out to several popular campsites. 20 minutes in, we met a couple, Craig and Kimberly. I still remember their names. They were really nice and friendly. So we quickly hit it off as couples and decided to camp close to each other. This was really good for us because not only were Craig and Kimberly good people, but they were experienced campers as well. Anyway, we got the camp set up, granted with much help from our new friends. We went hiking separately after that, but ended up having dinner together later at night. We talked, drank a little bit of vodka Craig had brought, then hit the sack at around 11 p.m. Sometime later, I was fully asleep when I felt something shaking my shoulder. I opened my eyes and saw that Sarah was awake. I said, "Sarah, what is it, babe?" And as I was saying that, Sarah gestured with her finger for me to be quiet. I was confused for a second or two, but suddenly, the source of Sarah's panic became evident. Someone was humming a song outside. I said to Sarah, but this time quietly, "That's gotta be Craig. He probably finished the bottle of vodka and got himself mad drunk." Then for some reason, I began to laugh uncontrollably. Eventually, I let out a big laugh, but stopped right away when a person outside did the same. He mimicked my laugh, exactly the way I laughed. That startled me at first, but not for long. I told Sarah to stay inside the tent, grabbed the flashlight, then headed outside, even though she was begging for me to stay put. I stepped outside, closed the zipper behind me, then when I turned around, I saw Craig outside of his tent. I flipped on the flashlight and shouted, "Hey Craig," as I laughed my head off at the sight of a man madly intoxicated in the middle of the woods. That laugh, though, didn't last. Craig, for some reason, charged at me at full speed. I felt my body instinctively getting ready for an impact as my shoulders squared up and I held the flashlight in a manner that would make it easier to strike at a target. Thankfully, the situation didn't escalate to violence. As it turned out, Craig had heard the same humming. Hence, he had come out to check on me, thinking that the humming was coming from me. And I had done the same thing, but thinking that it was him. We were facing each other and both of us sort of said the same thing. "That's not you." Then Craig suggested, "I think we should try to find the guy. We can't go back to sleep like this." I told him that I agreed. Then we both went back to our tents to tell our girlfriends that we wouldn't venture too far off for the search. Craig was already outside of our tent when I went back out there. That's when we heard someone striking at a tree with something substantial. We soon realized it was an axe hitting a tree trunk. Then I felt Craig grabbing my arm as he said, "Go get your girlfriend and follow us. We're getting the hell out of here." I went back inside the tent, told Sarah to put her jacket and shoes on, then went outside, while understandably, Sarah was in full panic mode. Craig and Kimberly ran toward us and told us to follow them. All of us ran, and not 5 seconds later, we heard trees being chopped off coming from all directions of the forest. All 4 of us were in good shape, so we managed to run all the way to the parking lot. It only took us 12 minutes to get there. From there, we drove to the nearest gas station and called the police. The cops arrived sometime later. We explained to them what had happened, then waited at the police station until morning to go back for our stuffs. At 9 a.m., 2 police officers and a park ranger escorted us back to our campsite. It was a big mess out there. In total, 7 trees were downed, with 2 of them resting on our tent. We also saw some trees nearby that were halfway chopped. I saw the park ranger pointing at the trees and saying something about having to finish off the chopping for safety. Anyway, we grabbed whatever we could, but our tent was completely destroyed. And that was the end of that. The cops had no idea what had happened. They were just as baffled as we were. Sarah and I, we still talk about that night from time to time. I once told her that maybe some local kids were having fun at our expense, but Sarah says if they were kids, they would have considered mission accomplished as soon as we ran off. Her argument is that the kids wouldn't waste their time chopping off all those trees. If they really wanted to destroy our stuff, there are easier ways. Frankly, I can't disagree with that. And you know, whatever the truth may be, I think we did the right thing by getting the heck out of there. We were really lucky to have met Craig and Kimberly. The year was 1994 and I was camping deep in the woods somewhere in Middle America. There were 5 of us in total, me, my friends Michael and Owen, and their girlfriends Gina and Angela. Yeah, I was the 5th wheel. I had broken up with my then girlfriend only 2 days before the camping trip. The whole trip was kind of awkward to me and I didn't want to go. But Michael and Owen insisted that I shouldn't be alone. Bunch of BS if you ask me, because surely listening to them getting it on at night in tents just yards away should make me feel really good about my breakup. But kidding aside, they meant well. Michael and Owen have always been the easygoing skateboarder types. Their girlfriends were chill as well. They made good company for sure, and that was very apparent on our first day in the woods. We left the city at 3:30 a.m. and arrived at the parking lot at the base of the mountain by 7 a.m. We then hiked all the way to our campsite, and the time was only 8:20 a.m. The first thing we did was to set up camp. You know, the tents, a fire pit, and so on. I remember breakfast was really good. There's nothing like having meals outdoors. After breakfast, we went hiking for a few hours, then we split and did our own thing. Michael took photographs, Angela was drawing, I went fishing, and so and so. It was a really good day. Nothing unexpected happened. The weather was perfect. We all got along. My friends were right about me having to be there. I felt great. The entire day went by so quickly since it was so much fun. Then night came. We lit up the campfire at 5:30 p.m., drank, ate, conversed until 9 p.m., then said goodnight. There were 3 tents. I was alone in one of them, and the couples in the rest. I began to read once I was inside the tent. I have sleeping problems. Normally, it takes over an hour to fall asleep, but with a book, I cut that by about a half. On that day, however, I fell asleep as soon as I lay down and picked up the book. It was wonderful, but only until my beautiful slumber was interrupted by something violent. In the middle of the night, I woke up to my tent being thrown around like it was a pebble. I could feel I was being tossed around so effortlessly. I obviously couldn't see how high or far I was being thrown, seeing as how I was inside the tent, but my guess is very high and very far, since what definitely woke me up was the pain of my back hitting a tree trunk, then me landing on the ground from somewhere fairly high. Because I tell ya, I couldn't breathe well after the fall. That's how much it hurt. It took a few seconds for me to have enough awareness of my surroundings to realize that Gina and Angela were weeping in pain somewhere close. I also heard Michael and Owen struggling seemingly in agony. I was pretty much doing the same. Maybe a minute had passed when I unzipped the now upside down door of the tent. I got out and the guys did the same soon after. Once outside, I could estimate the distance that I was thrown. I was maybe a good 12 yards away from the original spot. The other two tents seemed to have been thrown a bit farther than that. We gathered around the fire pit that was no longer lit. I asked the guys while pointing at my tent, "Were any of you awake while that was happening?" The guys all answered no, for the exception of Gina. She said, "I felt the tent being pushed a little before the big hit. It wasn't a gust or something falling on it. I couldn't hear anything, but I did see the top of the tent being pushed by something. Initially, it wasn't strong enough to be of concern, but something definitely was outside." As soon as Gina said those words, I was hit by something very powerful. One moment, I was standing by the fire pit. The next, I was some 2 cars length away from it. Something had slammed against me, and it felt organic. I'm talking about the thing that had rammed against me. Think of the difference between being hit with a person's hand versus a spoon, for example. One could tell the difference by the sound and feel of the contact. What hit me felt organic, or I might even say some type of energy. Having said that, I was on the ground and so out of it that I was seeing doubles. I heard the guys screaming and shouting like something terrible was happening. I got up only a few seconds after I was hit and saw the guys running deeper into the woods. I followed them as fast as I could, but it was impossible to catch up to them due to the injuries I had suffered. Some 10 seconds into the chase, I heard one of the girls screaming. I think it was Angela, but her scream made no sense. If you've ever spectated a car race, whether on TV or live, then you've witnessed firsthand how the sound travels extremely quickly as the cars pass by a stationary camera or you, the spectator, who's sitting in the seats. Well, it was just like that. Angela screamed, and her scream traveled from one direction to some unknown location until I couldn't hear it anymore. Followed by Angela, I heard the rest of the guys scream, and they all disappeared in the same manner. I was left all alone in the woods, preparing my mind for what's about to come, but minutes passed and nothing happened. When it seemed obvious that the thing was gone for now, I thought about searching for the guys, but soon realized that my body was far too mangled to mount a one-man search and rescue. I decided that getting help from the police was the best thing to do. It took me about 5 hours to get to the parking lot. It was dark and I was hobbled by the injuries. I was actually surprised that I could get there that fast. In any event, I was able to find the police with the help of some good Samaritans. Search and rescue began not long after, and the number of rescuers grew by huge number by hour 5. Sadly, nothing came of the search. The investigators concluded that it was an attack by a wild animal. Not a specific animal or how the attack happened, but simply an attack by a wild animal. Yeah, I guess if you can't make sense of something, then just blame it on wild animals. It's really convenient. Mind you, I protested the result of the investigation time and time again, but no one was willing to listen. They saw the campsite. There was almost no blood in the area, not really enough to claim a wild animal had attacked us that night. They saw how mangled I was, and yet there wasn't a single teeth or claw mark on my body. And what about the tents and the icebox that were flung a dozen yards away from their original spot? They all knew something really strange had occurred there. But the more anomalies they found, the more they wanted to shut me down. The search and rescue concluded a week after it started. They had found nothing. No clothes, body or body parts. Poof, my friends just vanished into thin air. There's a being or a creature out there that's abducting people from their camps, but the police refuse to have any discussion about it. It doesn't matter anymore. I'll never find out what happened to my friends. I get scared being anywhere where there's more than 5 trees in close distance. Yeah, I hate nature. I'd rather end myself than to walk into a forest. Experience like mine would do that to you. And I'll end it right there. I've got nothing more to say about it. I just gotta live with this. I used to go camping a lot back in the 90s, and there was this one time when I witnessed something that made me stop going camping forever. I was in the middle of the woods, deep inside a forest that was brand new to me. I was scoping out new places to camp that year, and so the area was mostly unfamiliar to me. I think the time was 9ish in the morning. When I was having breakfast, I saw a deer in the tree line, probably about 15 yards away from me. It was truly a beautiful sight to behold. Anyone who loves nature will vouch for me. It's really something else to watch wild animals when they're not aware of human presence. The deer didn't notice me for a couple of reasons. First off, the color of my tent was green, and so it blends in well with the forest. And secondly, I was wearing a hunting bodysuit. I don't hunt, but I had purchased a couple of them because they were perfect for camping and overall outdoor activities. But yeah, my body being mostly blocked by the tent, and on top of that, me wearing a hunting suit, they sort of made the perfect situation to observe the deer without detection. And here's the reason why I had to describe all of that. Because one minute, I was enjoying watching a deer grazing, but then the next minute, the same deer was now in the mouth of a creature that I had never seen before. Not in books, documentaries, or even in films. I know for a fact that it's not a creature that's ever been documented. That said, I hid myself behind the tent, then grabbed the field knife that I used to make a ham sandwich. It was the only weapon in possession. As the minutes passed, I heard the deer crying out in pain. The creature was eating it alive. It was the most horrible sound I had ever heard, listening to raw meat being shredded and the sound of bones crunching, all the while the prey still alive. The deer was alive for at minimum 3 minutes. I had to listen to it suffer for as long. It must have been roughly 10 minutes thereafter when I heard the creature running off deeper into the forest. I got up, checked my surrounding, then began packing things up at speed up light, like my life depended on it, because it probably did. It took me a couple of hours to walk back to the parking lot. It was by far the most harrowing 2 hours of my life. But I did get back to civilization safely and never went camping after that. It's been almost 30 years since the incident, and I haven't set foot in any forest since. I'm gonna keep it that way. I enjoy the concrete jungle a whole lot more. I was born and raised in New York City, and I've never been much of a nature person. However, that sort of changed once I got hooked on a genre of videos on YouTube. It's a camping, survive with minimal equipment type of videos. Those videos are normally about an hour long, but I happily sit through them and sometimes watch 2 to 3 of them in succession when I have the time. With that explained, I don't think I need explaining why I had spent $2,000 in camping equipment only a couple of weeks after having found a new passion in camping. The timing for my first camping trip was perfect. My sister lives in Utah, and I already had plans to visit her that year. Hence, what I did was to extend the trip from 7 days to 14 so I could use the first week in Utah camping in their great outdoors. I chose Boulder Mountain as my first ever camping location. I was able to get some advice from fellow fans of camping videos. They told me to stay close to the main campground, the dirt roads, and the larger trails. Basically, they stressed that I had to rein in my enthusiasm until I became more knowledgeable of the wild. The first day at Boulder Mountain was fantastic. The weather was perfect, I was feeling great, and really pumped to become an expert in wilderness. Unfortunately, however, that enthusiasm lasted for only an hour or so, I had gotten lost. Listen, I had no clue how easy it is to get lost in the woods. I strayed off the main trail for 10 minutes, and that's all it took for me to get utterly lost. It kinda happened like this. I saw something interesting, so I went to it. After having done so, I found another interesting thing and followed it again. Now, repeat that a few times, then you are lost. Anyway, half an hour later, I was still lost. But in a way, I was in a worse situation. You see, there was a foul stench in the air. I feared that the source might be a carcass, and you know what that means. Predators roam the area. It was quite a scary place to be for an amateur like myself. Coyotes I should be able to fend off, but bears? I don't think so. And even elks. Oh, I hear they can kick your ass to the moon and back. They're not to be messed with. I continued walking since that was the only thing that I could do. After some time, however, the stench became unbearable. I was going to double back, but here's the thing about curiosity. It tends to make people make really dumb decisions. So I ended up following the stench. I wanted to see the source of it. I just followed it. Don't ask me why. Less than a minute thereafter, I had made a chilling discovery. In a space the size of a tennis court, there was at minimum 20 carcasses of moose. There were many signs that something abnormal had happened there. Not only were there one too many carcasses, but it was the manner they were killed that made the scene so grisly. Here's the thing, all of the carcasses looked clean. Their limbs were intact, and I couldn't see any bite marks that could indicate an attack by a large animal. That being said, all of their stomachs had holes in them. If you could imagine something or someone putting their paw or hand through the stomach, that's the kind of hole I was seeing on the animals. Another weird thing was the fact that they weren't eaten. With that much stench, you would think some animal would have come and taken a bite of them, but no, I didn't see any sign of that. I remember observing the animals for about 5 minutes when suddenly I came to the realization that I was standing in a spot where all these once living animals had been killed. It was time to leave the place. I turned around and continued the search for the main trail. Luckily, I came across a hunter who helped me get back to my car. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the beginning and the end of my camping adventure. I sold all of my brand new camping gears on eBay and never went back camping again. As much as I want to experience firsthand what those cool camping YouTubers do, I think for me it's better that I enjoy it in the comfort of my couch. That is all. I was camping on a mountain when this incident took place. It was on the second day on the mountain and I was setting up camp in a new spot. I had hiked all day to try to find the perfect place to sleep for the night. It was a glorious spot overlooking the lake to the north and the peaks of the mountain towering all around me. I got the campsite ready by 5 p.m., finished dinner by 7, then began investigating the surrounding area for an hour or so. I didn't go too far, obviously, since it was dark. But there was so much to see and so much to take in, I had no need to venture far to find something interesting. I was surrounded by beauty in its purest form. By 9 p.m., I was securely tucked in inside a sleeping bag, which was inside the tent. I was about to fall asleep, but then I felt a sting on my neck. I slapped on my neck, hoping that I would catch the bug that had bit me, but no luck. I turned on the flashlight and searched everywhere inside the tent, but couldn't find any insect. I would have gone back to sleep right away, only if my vision hadn't turned all trippy. I didn't feel pain or weak. It didn't feel like an effect of some type of a poison. I had been bit by a rattlesnake when I was young and nearly died from it. You can trust me when I say this. Real poison running through your vein is one of the most painful things one can ever experience. The sensation that I felt from the bite, it was more like what people describe when they do coke. I felt a little dizzy and disoriented, but overall, I was feeling real good. Even so, it's not normal to feel such a way under any circumstances other than when you are high. Thus, I decided I was gonna get some fresh air and to try to clear my head. I stepped out of the tent and walked around a bit. I was a bit concerned that moving around would elevate my blood pressure and thus hastening the effect of whatever poison that was in my system. However, it wasn't like I had better alternative. The nearest hospital was some 100 miles away, and that's only calculating the distance from the base of the mountain. What's more, I hadn't brought my satellite phone on that camping trip because this stupid man forgot to renew the contract for it and thought that I'd be okay without it for this trip. So essentially, if the poison was deadly, the choice was to either die inside the tent or at least meet the end while enjoying the glorious view of the outdoors. Let's just say that it was not a tough choice to make. So once outside, my vision became even trippier. At first, I could see the outlines of animals in the surrounding area shine and glow, as though they had Christmas ornament all over their body. I remember smiling and being so happy. I had never seen or felt anything like that in my life. After some time, people began appearing from inside the woods. They had the same glowing outlines like on the animals. They passed me by so nonchalantly, and I in turn peacefully observed them, drawing as little attention to me as possible. I saw all types of people. Some were dressed like the natives, some looked as though they had been plucked right out of a film from the 50s, and some of them looked like me, the modern man. I watched them intently, and some of them stared back at me. Throughout the whole thing, I was relaxed and didn't feel any apprehension for what was transpiring right in front of my eyes. The march of the people and animals was graceful and peaceful. Then, sometime thereafter, my eyelids became so heavy. I knew I was about to pass out. So what I did next was to get back to the tent as quickly as possible, and the rest is blank. When I woke up the next morning, I felt better than ever. I checked the surrounding area of the camp in search of footprints, but I saw none. So the bottom line was, the previous night, I was either tripping out from whatever substance that coursed through my body, or maybe, just maybe, I saw the spirits of people and animals making their grand journey to some place we don't know. I can't tell you exactly what happened to me on that night, but I can tell you what happened afterwards. Somehow, I can tell apart the happy people from the unhappy ones. Equally, the good people from the evil ones. It's a rush of feeling that comes to me, and I haven't been wrong about people ever since the incident. My life was good before the camping trip, and I dare say it's been better afterwards. Sorry, Dennis, but this is not a scary story. It's got a happy ending, or more like a happy progress, so deal with that, my friend. I went camping for the first time in my life in the summer of 2017. My friend's boyfriend had suggested it, and we all thought it could be kind of fun. I grew up in the city and never spent a night outdoors. It was kind of exciting to think about that. We set up camp at a spot some 10 minutes of walking distance from a lake. The plan was to hike in the morning, then go swimming in the lake in the afternoon. We left the camp for the hike at 9:30 in the morning, but couldn't walk for more than an hour. I'm not much of an athlete, but I can walk for longer than an hour. It's just that walking on a paved road is much easier than going uphill on a rough trail. Hence, I was spent after an hour, and we went back to our campsite, walking another hour for the return. When we were close to our camp, we noticed something had happened there. Something violent. As we got closer and closer, it became clear to us that a wild animal had trashed our entire campsite. The tent was shredded and was all over the place. The icebox was in pieces like they were made from paper and glue. Even the camping stove, which is made entirely out of metal, it looked as though it had gone through a giant shredder. The campsite was a disaster, and it didn't take a wildlife expert to figure out that the culprit was a bear. It had caused all of that destruction during the 2 hours that we had left the camp for the hike. Now, let's make this clear. I harbor no ill feelings for the animal that destroyed our camp. In fact, the fault probably lies with us. We probably haven't packed our food sealed well enough, and that likely would have attracted a bear. With that being said, imagine if we were at the campsite when the bear came around. Do you have any idea how rigid and sturdy ice boxes are? Picture yourself replacing the icebox with the lumpy dough that is your body. The outcome of a bear and human coming together would have been very nasty. For the human, that is. They say bear attacks are extremely rare in the US. The majority of the experienced campers we spoke to told us that slips and falls were far more likely to kill people than wild animals. Even so, the thought of being eaten alive by a bear is horrifying, because that's what they do. They don't kill their prey before eating them like the lions do. They'll bite off a chunk from here, then another chunk from there. You'd be lucky if it hits an artery while it bites, and it results in you bleeding out quickly. Holy Mother of God, I'm done thinking about this. Goodbye. It was in the middle of summer last year. I was solo camping in the woods, and it had been 2 days since I had settled in the same spot. The time was about 8 p.m. and I had a fire going at my campsite. I believe I was having a chicken tikka masala when a stranger appeared from the woods, and he had scared the crap out of me. The stranger apologized and explained himself. He told me that he lost his way in the woods and wasn't able to find his campsite. So basically, when he saw fire from afar, he knew that the source of the fire would likely have a person nearby. Anyhow, the guy's name was Michael, and he was kind of new to the whole camping scene. After listening to what he had to say, I told him that he could use my spare sleeping bag and that I would help him get back to his campsite the next morning. I also offered him dinner, but he said he wasn't hungry, which was weird seeing as how he had been lost for some 5 hours. I don't know, but I think I would have been hungry if I were him. But yeah, I continued with my dinner, and we just chatted about life and stuff for a while. After dinner, I grabbed a cigar and offered one to Michael as well. Michael said no thank you. Then I turned my body toward my bag that was on the ground to my left so I could reach in to grab my Zippo. I grabbed it, and when I turned around again, Michael was gone. I heard no footsteps, and it took maybe 2 seconds to grab the lighter. In no way should he have been able to walk away from the camp that quietly and that fast. But somehow, he did. I didn't see Michael ever again after that. My buddies tell me half-jokingly that I must have seen a ghost of some camper who must have gotten lost and died. I laugh about it in front of them, but not so much on the inside. Call me superstitious all you want, but I think they're right. What I saw that night wasn't a person. It was a ghost. I'm from a very small town located in one of the most remote regions in Russia. We don't produce anything in our town, nor do we have strategic resources that can be exploited. We're here because, for one, we've always been here. We call this land a home for many generations. But mainly we're here because Mother Russia wants us on this land. We are like the living landmarks that represent the extreme regions of our country. We've long ago lost our ways and can no longer support our existence on our own. Today, most of the things we use and consume are flown in from the big cities. With all that said, there are still some of us who desperately hold on to our tradition. We are only a few and a dying breed, but we do our best to hunt our food, make clothes out of the fur and leather from the hunt, and we still build our homes in the traditional ways. My point has always been a practical one. What will you do when the shipments stop coming in? What happens when you are no longer needed? At any rate, I went on a short hunting trip the other day. I went alone because my 3 usual hunting partners had to stay in town to repair our homes. We needed the repair done, but we also needed to stock up on some extra meat. So I told the guys to stay and make the repairs while I go out and see if I can bring back home some good venison. The plan was to give myself 2 nights and 3 days to get the job done. The first day was disappointing. I nabbed a few birds and that was it. When night came, I set up camp and cooked one of the 5 birds I caught that day. At least I didn't go through my provisions. I'll take a win in any way I can. After the meal, I took a piss and was about to go to sleep when I heard a blood-curdling scream of a woman. I grabbed my rifle right away and began to comb the nearby area. I couldn't see anyone, so I shouted, "Lady, if you need my help, I'll need you to scream again. It's the only way that I'll be able to find you." It was dead quiet for about a minute, then the lady spoke this time. "They took my baby. Please come and help me find her." I couldn't really tell where her voice was coming from. It almost sounded like I was getting a 360-degree audio experience, like her voice was coming from every direction. That's how clearly I could make out every word she spoke. Some seconds later, I responded, "You have to come to where I am if you want my help. I'm sure you can see the bonfire by my camp. Come and let me help you." The lady responded right away as she said, "Just follow my voice and I'll guide you to where I am." It was all wrong the way she said those words. Only moments ago she was desperate to find her child, but now she was talking to me in a sensuous manner. From that point on, I knew not to respond to her and most of all, hold on tight to my trusty rifle. I sat by the fire and decided I wasn't going to get any sleep that night. I got up often and checked my surroundings for intruders. All the while, the woman continued to beg and sometimes demand that I walk into the dark and find her. Her tone would change from desperate to friendly, from friendly to flirtatious. She was either a person who had men hiding with her to steal from me, or she was something else, something not human and with bad intentions. The latter was more likely as people can't survive out here for long periods of time. I would also point out that we know the land through and through. My people are the only permanent settlers in the 500-mile radius. The woman was likely not a person. The sun rose early morning and I was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Regardless of what was waiting for me in the dark, now the daylight would reveal it, or it would have ran away since it could no longer hide in the dark. With my rifle handy, I began to inspect the surrounding area. What I found were the footprints of a 4-legged animal. I could tell that the hind legs carried most of the weight and the forelegs did the most of the directional changes. I can't tell you what animal made those footprints, and that's because I had never seen footprints like them in our region. We have many stories of ghosts and creatures in our part of the land. They have different names for different tribes, but the stories of them are generally very similar. What I came across on that night was likely one of those vile creatures. It's a good thing that I kept a cool head and didn't fall for the trickster. You know, had I followed the creature, I could have been a meal for it, instead of me hunting a meal for myself. I'm gonna come out here again one day and hunt down the creature once and for all. It'll forever regret for messing with the wrong man. I enjoy camping, but not in the company of others. I mean, the whole point of going out into nature is to be away from people, so yeah, I always go camping on my own. That being said, there was this one time when I got lost in the woods. I had already set up camp in the afternoon and began hiking in the woods at around 2 p.m. The thing is, I got carried away and ventured a little too far into unknown territory. Bottom line, I got lost and couldn't find my way back to the campsite. It was dark by 6 p.m. and I knew I was in a big trouble. There's no cell reception where I camp, and I never bothered to invest in a satellite phone. I was going to have to spend the night with only a thin jacket and a half a bottle of water. Anyhow, I continued walking a bit more because I thought I had seen some lights to the south of my current position. If I was lucky, I was going to find a fellow camper, 20 minutes later, I was greeted by a large group of campers who seemed to be having a party in the middle of the forest. Remember what I said about camping alone? Well, that opinion quickly went out the window as I was very happy to see people. I was welcomed to the party and I said hello to the 9 people who were set by a bonfire. I don't really remember much from that night, as I quickly got drunk out of my mind, then hooked up with a girl whose face I can't for the life of me recall. Once I arrived at their campsite, it felt as though something had taken over my mind and I was put on autopilot. I ate and drank everything they had offered. I laughed and danced with them like I had known them my whole life, as though they were my best friends. I'm generally very cautious with people. It takes a while for me to trust anyone. Hence, I was definitely acting out of character that night. It all seemed like a dream, and you know what? It might as well been, because when I woke up, there was nothing around me. All the tents were gone and not a soul other than me was there. The only sign of there ever being people from the previous night was the already expired bonfire. Mind you, I woke up at 7 a.m. You can't possibly tell me that all 9 people who were drunk like fools had the awareness to wake up early and leave without me noticing. But hey, they were gone, so I suppose they left. Till this day, I wonder if everything that I experienced that night was some sort of a fear-induced imagination, that perhaps my brain found a way to keep me occupied as I feared for my life. I don't really know, but all I can tell you is that everything felt truly real. So this really isn't your typical camping story, but it's got an element to it, so I don't think it's too far-fetched to call it one. It happened on my birthday some 20 years ago. I had just turned 9 years old and had a big party with all of my friends and relatives earlier in the afternoon. Come nighttime, I told Mom that I wanted to sleep outside. I used to do that sometimes. Dad would pitch a tent for me in the backyard whenever my cousins would sleep over. I loved going camping with my parents, so during school months when we couldn't go camping, I would satiate my appetite for the wild in our own backyard. That's essentially how I ended up in a tent pitched in the backyard in the company of my cousin Chloe. And yeah, the time was about 10 p.m. and me and Chloe were busy catching up since we hadn't seen each other for about a month. Then in the middle of our conversation, we heard something rub against the wall of the tent. We may have heard the same sound 3 or 4 times in the first 10 seconds after hearing it initially. But then only moments later, not only did the rubbing sound intensify, but the tent was now shaking from all the rubbing. Everything had happened so fast that we had very little time to react calmly and properly. We both panicked, jumped up, then I saw Chloe zipping down the mesh and the nylon door at the same time. As soon as the door was zipped down, a swarm of rats began to flood the interior of the tent. We both ran out, using the rats as mats, as there was absolutely no place to place our feet on solid ground. The best description for the scene would be the sea of rats. I mean, the entire backyard was covered with them. It was all dark gray everywhere. We saw everything unfolding because the floodlight with the sensor had already been triggered. Chloe and I first went to the back door, but it was locked. It was an example of forces of habit. My dad should have left the door open, but he locked it as he normally does. We then ran to the front yard, not to get to the front door since they would have been locked as well. I took Chloe there so we could take refuge on the roof of our car. On top of our car, we began screaming from the top of our lungs, but Mom and Dad were already running out of the house. They had already heard the initial commotion, so they went to check the backyard first. Then after realizing that we were no longer there, they doubled back to the front of the house where our screams were coming from. Mom and Dad took us inside the house while keeping us off the ground. We had a couple of dozen rats run inside the house as the door had to be opened to get inside. I remembered not feeling quite safe inside the house either. but I suppose it was definitely better than the outside. Come morning, Dad was busy trapping the rats, and Mom was busy on the phone with animal control. We later learned that a small earthquake had occurred overnight. Whatever they say about rats having sixth sense that can warn them about natural disasters seemed to be true. Anyhow, both me and Chloe got bit multiple times by the rats. We both had to get tetanus shots in the afternoon. I don't know if it does anything after the fact, but Chloe is alive and well, and Di as well. It's just something crazy that had happened to me when I was young. I just thought I'd share it. Bye now.